All right, this is going to be a technique starting from side control that will eventually get me to a version of having your back. All right, so for me, my favorite thing to do from side control is to get control from this position here. I'm going to be, whatever way I started here, I want to end up here, where I'm going to end up peeling this off, getting a super good grip here. Now, for me, typically, I like to hold the pants on the other side, often like this, or hold the belt. And a lot of times, what you can do here is you can even like kind of relieve your opponent here, and whatever way he goes, he's gonna go. But for me, ultimately I could pull his back from this position here, but I'm gonna do sort of, this is like my tried and true. Let's say he does a quick buck, he oompas a bit. I'm gonna try to capture his guard, his gi here, his lapel, and I wanna get him to his side so I can pull his back. So what I'm gonna do first is, I usually will just kind of, wait a beat. I have a good grip here. I'm gonna grab him behind the collar and just gonna count it out for myself. At some point, I'm gonna pull really hard and fast, like this. When I get him in this position here, I'm gonna go straight to what everyone calls the seat belt, but it doesn't matter what you call it because it's this, right? You're gonna get this here. To me, I don't care what grip I have, but it needs to be a solid grip that's tight. Oftentimes, what I'm gonna do then is I'm gonna sit back. He's gonna be in this position here. My goal then is gonna be to have this leg over his shoulder. So sometimes I'll need to rock and I'm gonna bring this over. He's sitting, and I call this a low back position. I don't know what you call it. I like to pretend that I made it up, but I'm sure I didn't. But I do this all the time, every day. So if I have this position on you, the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna reaching for my ankle. I grab my ankle, and then just like kind of like cinching up like a knot or something, I'm gonna start sitting back and it's gonna get really tight. So I'm gonna sit back here and it's gonna get really tight until I'm here. Then I have a lockup on you. You could do almost anything from here, and you can attest, right, that this feels really bad, right?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, this is gonna feel terrible when people do this on me, and they never do. But when they do, I know that it feels bad. So the technique that I usually do is to, oftentimes you're gonna be propped up in this position here. This elbow is gonna be butted up against your knee. And so with one hand, you can get your submission. But it doesn't matter. You can get it in a bunch of different ways. You could lean back. And then the other thing I often do is a shoulder submission where you're pulling back really hard on that shoulder. But oftentimes, more times now for me, I'm gonna get this in whatever way I can. It's basically any kind of chicken wing Kimura type position that you're having, and you can get this submission fast, and you can get it with one hand. You can also pull it with two hands, and he'll feel it. And when you train and you try to do this technique, definitely do it slowly. You don't want to pull this really hard. Oftentimes, I'm just gonna pull it, really gently until I feel like he feels it. There's a trigger point for him where he knows this is a submission. That's the technique.
Do you ever finish with the choke?
I don't finish with the choke. You could. I have finished sometimes with the choke. Sometimes you could finish with the traditional, the old school, that triangle where you're basically neck cranking the person by reaching for their legs.
Right.
But for me, the Kimura, the one-armed Kimura, is just like money in the bank.
Right.
The shoulder technique I don't do as much, but that one works just as well. Where you're, what you find from that position is so many people, they're not paying enough attention to, where their elbow is here to here, and so this is where a guy is going to be really weak. If you're 2-on-1 on his elbow from this position here, so let's say I'm in here, you can get to this position a lot of different ways. And let's say he's down here, he's tight. If you can put two hands on one, you have so much more power. And just like sort of the body mechanics, a person doesn't have as much power keeping this down as you do pulling it up. You just have so much power to yank it up that you'll get it. You'll eventually get it. And it's really hard for him. If you're holding onto his elbow here and you're pulling back, you have just so much strength. And then here, you just have so much power over that because that's the rotation of the shoulder that it's just gonna be
I definitely don't feel like
really good submission for you. And so that's what I do.
Can you show us one more time from the beginning?
Sure. And this is just one way to get it, but this is one of the ways that I first started to get it. was from side control. You can get this side position a bunch of different ways, but usually I'm going to start here. So I'm in side control. I always peel this off and I get it as tight as possible. This feels really good to me because what I'm doing is I'm basically keeping him down on one end, and then if I pull this on the other end, I kind of have control over him. He can't move, and I have, like, I can kind of do whatever I want. But let's say he oompas a bit, or whatever I can do, I can get this. I grab this lapel under here. I'm grabbing his collar with my left hand or my other hand, and I'm just gonna do a quick pop. If his arm's like this, it ends up being underneath, it's okay because you're gonna have to readjust anyway. But you're basically gonna adjust. You have to get underneath the elbow here, and you gotta reach across here. This is a seatbelt position. You could grab your own wrist like this, or you could use this grip as well, or you could do what I call like the bro. I call this the bro, whatever, I don't know. But I call this the bro. So I'm like, hey bro. And then I sit back, I'm in this position, I need to get this out. So often what I do is I'll tilt, and then I'll come back out. And then I'm just going straight into my position here. I need to sit back until it's really nice and tight, and then it's game on. So submission number one is a shoulder submission where I'm gonna lean back and pull this until it's really tight. The second one is basically leaning this up against his elbow. His elbow up against my knee. I'm gonna pull back with one arm. And that's it.
One last time, no explanation.
One last time, no explanation.
No words.
You got it.
All right, Francisco, thanks so much for showing your technique. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks, dude. Thanks for having me.
Next week, we're going to be back with a new episode in the new studio. So be sure to check that out. Ali Geddes, the competitor from England, is going to be our guest next week. So be sure to tune in for that. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for tuning in, and keep on rolling.
That concludes this installment of This Week in BJJ. Subscribe on iTunes, watch and review past episodes, and then be sure to join us again next Friday night, right here for another live edition of This Week in BJJ.